So far, I've talked about the idea that science is a way of investigating the world and taking ideas, hypotheses, philosophical conjectures, and playing around with their interpretation to see if we can get a simple model that makes better predictions. I talked briefly about the heliocentric versus geocentric models and how different explanations create different predictions. And the measure of our accuracy is the power of our predictions. So, for instance, if I constantly make predictions that are later proved to be false, then my model is not very good. On the other hand, if I'm constantly making predictions that turn out to be true, then it's an indication, not a confirmation, but an indication that the model I'm working with has at least passing accuracy as an explanation for the world. However, when we expand our observations to more distant heavenly bodies or moving around our solar system, we start to encounter anomalies. We start to encounter things that we couldn't have predicted from our geocentric worldview. However, once we adopt a slightly different frame of reference, a heliocentric theory of the solar system, all of a sudden, what used to be chaotic and random and anomalous events start to make greater and greater sense. So the power of good theory is that it allows us to make better and more accurate predictions about what we will experience into the future. Okay, one criticism that is often leveled at conspiracy type thinking is the idea that conspiracy theories are unfalsifiable. The core thing that separates a scientific explanation from a conjecture, from a philosophy, from a worldview, is its ability to be falsified. Okay, so let's start with some basic relevant terms. A theory is simply a set of statements or principles devised to explain a group of facts or phenomena. A conspiracy is a secret plan made by two or more people to do something bad, illegal, or against someone's wishes. And it's falsifiable if the statement can be logically contradicted by an empirical test or evidence. Now, if we want to be scientific, we also have to have a very clear definition of what an hypothesis is. A hypothesis comes in two forms. There's what's called the null hypothesis, or the idea that is the sort of default position. So the default position is presumed to be true until and unless we have statistical evidence in the form of a hypothesis test that indicates it's wrong. Okay, so we start with the null hypothesis. And then we propose a logically contradictory statement. And these are what we test against each other. So the null hypothesis is presumed to be true until we can prove it false. And an alternative hypothesis is a tentative explanation for an observation, phenomenon, or a scientific problem that can be tested. Okay, so we have a null hypothesis, and this is what we want to prove false if we are to accept the alternate hypothesis. So when it came to, let's talk about a conspiracy hypothesis, we would have the hypothesis in two frames. The null hypothesis is simply that there is no conspiracy. There is no illegal deal. There is no pact. There is no group of people behind the scenes trying to set an agenda for, let's say, the events as they unfold in the real world, or the direction that humanity is trying to go. That's the null hypothesis. The alternate hypothesis, being a tentative explanation, would be something like there is a group of people, or a group of corporations, or governments, or some kind of hidden agency or cabal of people who are trying to control things, who are trying to manipulate human behavior, who are trying to control the trajectory of human experience and human species as we go into the future. So these are logically contradictory. They can't both be true at the same time. Either there is not a group of people trying to control things illegally at the expense of the public good for their own benefit, or there is a group of people who are trying to control humanity and what we know in order to propel us into a future that doesn't benefit us but benefits them. Okay, these are logically contradictory. And in order to test this, we need to have some form of evidence that can distinguish between the two. If we can demonstrate evidence that there is some level of conspiracy, then this disproves the null hypothesis and suggests that our alternate hypothesis, as a tentative explanation, may in fact be a better explanation for what's happening in the world. Now, I want to be very clear here. Just because we can show that there is some level of conspiracy, it does not automatically mean that there are lizard people and royal bloodlines that intermingle between the Rockefellers and no, it doesn't mean that. It simply means that we have rejected the null hypothesis, that there is a conspiracy of some sort. It still leaves open the entirety of the possibility space as to what level of conspiracy there is. So all we're doing at this point, we're trying to establish the plausibility of the theory that there is at least some degree of agenda-driven control of the human species. That's all we're testing. So first, we have our null hypothesis, that there is no conspiracy. And then we have our alternate hypothesis, that there is some sort of conspiracy. This can create a level of prediction, what evidence we might want to look for in order to disprove the null hypothesis. We want to falsify the null hypothesis if we are to accept the alternate hypothesis. But accepting the alternate hypothesis has no bearing on who or what or how or why this certain group of conspirators is controlling humanity. So just make that really, really clear. So first we have our null hypothesis, and then we use our alternate hypothesis to make predictions about the type of evidence we should see in the world. And third, we go ahead and we collect that evidence and see if we can find evidence like this. So to give a very, very simple example, we might see a group of white swans in a lake or a pond, and we might believe that all swans are white. Now, there's two ways we could go about testing this theory. We could either go out and try to find all of the swans in the world, and if they're all white, well, we still leave open the possibility that there is one swan we haven't yet found and counted. So if we're looking out for white swans, then we have no ability to determine whether or not we've disproved that theory. But all it takes is a single observation, a black swan. That's all it takes to disprove our theory that all swans are white. Okay, so that's why if we have a null hypothesis that all swans are white, the evidence we should start looking for is any swan that is not white. And then we can use that as evidence against the null hypothesis. And then we need to have a better theory about swans. Because if our initial theory was that all swans are white, then clearly our theory is incomplete. And so we need to have a better and broader set of explanations and information in order to have a better theory about swans. Okay, and to finish off this video, what I would like to discuss is a conspiracy theory. This is a theory that we can use to make predictions or hypotheses that have a falsifiable element. Okay, so the conspiracy theory is simply this. The COVID-19 crisis was in part a manufactured crisis. There were special interest groups that conspired, which means they used illegal or unethical behaviors to manipulate public behavior for their own benefit. And most importantly, their behavior, their benefit, was in contrast to the public good. That is the conspiracy theory. Now, you'll notice this does not say who, it does not say why, it does not say how. At the moment, we are just establishing plausibility. Is it plausible that there was a manufactured element to the COVID crisis? This does not mean that the disease SARS-CoV-2 does not exist. It does not mean people didn't die. It does not mean people didn't get sick. It does not mean that there was no threat. It simply means that there was a part of the overall situation we found ourselves in over the last 2.5 years that had some element in which human behavior was manipulated against the good of the public for the benefit of a group of people who did illegal things or unethical things to benefit themselves. So my question to you is this plausible? Is there any plausibility to this idea? Because if there is plausibility here, then we can go to the next step and we can start to talk about likelihoods. Like I said, it says nothing about the disease. It says nothing about the goodwill of people in positions of, say, medical institutions. It says nothing about the evilness of individuals. All it says is that there is some element of the fiasco we've witnessed over the 2.5 years that was pointing directly to a conspiracy of individuals to manipulate the public for their own benefit. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for this video.